Desmond lives with his brother Hal, mother Bertha, and father Tom. World War I veteran Tom returns home traumatized. He's furious and drinks heavily due to trauma. Bertha calms Desmond and Hal by saying Tom is angry with himself. During their childhood, Desmond and Hal spent their time together, climbing rocks and enjoying outdoors. They occasionally fight, and Tom, instead of restraining them, encourages it, asking, "Why stop them? Let them fight!" Managing both at once is harder. Usually gentle, Desmond almost hurt Hal with a brick. Hal recovers, but Bertha's harsh reminder, taking another's life is a terrible sin, greatly hurts Desmond. Fast forward 15 years, and Desmond is working at his local church. He runs outdoors to aid after seeing an accident via a window. He rescues the victim by stopping the bleeding with his belt. At the hospital, the doctor compliments Desmond for his fast thinking. Desmond is impressed by the work of the medical team and has a tremendous desire to assist others. While in the hospital, he meets Nurse Dorothy and is immediately enamored. He even gives blood simply to get a chance to communicate with her. The following day, Desmond asks Dorothy out on a date. Though he nearly makes a mistake by attempting to kiss her suddenly, she respects his honesty. Their connection deepens, and Desmond begins learning more about medicine from the books Dorothy provides him. During a family meal, Hal declares that he's joining in World War II, just as his father Tom did. He chooses to keep it a secret until after he has already joined up, knowing his family would not be happy. Bertha is upset when Hal says he's entering the military, arguing it goes against her values since it means he'll be murdering people. Tom, badly affected by PTSD, feels emotional and upset at seeing his kid in military. Witnessing this, Desmond decides he too would join, opting to become a physician so Dorothy won't be sad. He proposes to Dorothy, and she excitedly accepts. Before departing, Desmond visits Tom at the graves of his slain companions. Tom expresses his sadness, stating he doesn't want to bury his boys as well. On the day Desmond travels for Fort Jackson, Dorothy offers him a Bible with her image inside for support. At Fort Jackson, Desmond meets his new colleagues, notably Private Smitty, who intimidates him with a knife. They are presented to Sergeant Howell, a gruff and imposing character who instantly creates a terrible impression by ranting and insulting everyone's looks. Desmond finds Howell's actions entertaining, causing Howell to shout at him, "Are you grinning at me, boy? Or is it simply how you look?" Training starts, and Desmond succeeds in the obstacle course, owing to his mountain background. However, he has a huge challenge during rifle training as he refuses to take up the gun. Sergeant Howell summons Desmond to Captain Glover's office to explain his viewpoint. Desmond believes he's a conscientious objector and shouldn't be compelled to carry a firearm. He also wants not to work on Saturdays, his Sabbath, but Glover laughs it off, questioning Desmond's faithfulness. Glover questions Desmond's ability to follow commands, adding, "I can't trust you if you can't do it here. I can't trust you in combat," and insults him in front of the other troops. That night, Private Smitty snatches Desmond's Bible, prompting a brawl. Despite the provocation, Desmond keeps cool and respectfully asks for his Bible back. The following day, Desmond is scheduled for a mental examination. During a psychiatric assessment, Desmond is asked whether he's hearing voices. He explains that he's merely a fervent believer and not mentally sick. The doctor notifies Captain Glover that Desmond is sane and cannot be dismissed, but he is permitted to stay as a combat medic provided he does well in other areas of training. Glover, irritated, instructs Sergeant Howell to detain Desmond in the barracks, where he is forced to arduous labor like scrubbing toilets. Hal, meanwhile, sabotages the bunk arrangements, informing everyone they won't get a weekend off and insinuating that Desmond is the reason. That night, as Desmond sleeps, the other privates aggressively attack him. Smitty questions why Desmond isn't going, and when Sergeant Howell comes for the lineup, he encourages Desmond to resign for his own safety. Desmond refuses to leave and won't identify the perpetrators. After their training is finished, everyone gets to go home except Desmond, who is detained for insubordination. Dorothy, standing at the altar for their wedding, feels concerned and worries something has gone wrong. In his cell, Desmond struggles with the circumstances but maintains a cool veneer when Glover visits him. Glover pushes him to plead guilty to avoid charges and be freed, but Desmond rejects. Dorothy hears of Desmond's plight and visits him, asking him to prioritize his safety and only complete the rifle training, which she explains does not require him to kill. Desmond stays solid in his ideas, causing Dorothy to ask Tom and Bertha for support. The following day, Tom appears to Fort Jackson in his military uniform, decked with his decorations. He requests to meet with the general directing the judicial proceedings. Desmond pleads not guilty, and just as he's about to be sentenced, Tom runs into the courtroom with a letter from the general. The letter claims that conscientious objectors are protected by the U.S. Constitution, resulting to the dismissal of Desmond's case. Relieved, Desmond is finally allowed to begin his training as a military medic. He and Dorothy are married as planned. Time passes, and Desmond's regiment, the 77th, is dispatched to Okinawa, Japan. Upon arrival in Okinawa, the harsh reality of war becomes evident to Desmond and his battalion as they observe troops carrying stacks of dead corpses like they were simple sacks. They settle into the barracks and meet the other men from the 96th Battalion, who tell them about Hacksaw Ridge. The ridge has been hotly contested, with American troops unable to seize it despite several assaults owing to unrelenting Japanese bombardment. Desmond is instructed to remove the Red Cross symbol from his sleeve to avoid becoming a target. Days later, the reinforced unit approaches Hacksaw Ridge, knowing that seizing it is important for their quest to regain Okinawa and ultimately Japan. The combat starts with U.S. Navy missiles pouring down on the Japanese positions, producing a chaotic sight of explosions and smoke. Desmond's platoon mounts the hill and quickly confronts fierce battle. As the conflict rages, Desmond stays steadfast, frequently risking his life to bring injured comrades down the slope. Despite the perils, including near brushes with Japanese forces, Smitty has Desmond's back and helps him negotiate the battlefield. As night comes, Desmond's squad makes up camp at their freshly gained position, planning to regain the remainder of the ridge. In the morning, Desmond expresses a wish to hunt for any survivors remained on the ridge, but Sergeant Howell rejects the notion as too perilous. Smitty offers to cover Desmond, and Howell grudgingly accepts. They travel back down the slope, and Desmond manages to save a few more men before they take a rest in a hole for protection. During this silence, Smitty pays respect for Desmond, noting his courage and devotion. They even share a giggle, connecting over their experiences. Later, as Desmond goes off to sleep, he has a violent nightmare of enemy forces ambushing them. He wakes up in a panic and relates the dream with Smitty, making a joke about his hatred to weapons even in his nightmares. Desmond reveals his deep objection to utilizing weapons and the foundations of his ideas. The following morning, the mayhem on the hill continues as the conflict carries on. The Japanese army conducts a furious counterattack, catching the Americans off guard. The situation spirals into turmoil, and Sergeant Howell orders the battalion to fall back and wait for Navy help. Tragically, Smitty dies before Desmond can transfer him to safety. The surviving American troops rush down the slope, but Desmond sticks behind. Hearing the screams of his colleagues left behind, he thinks it's his responsibility, prompted by his religion, to remain and aid. Desmond starts the agonizing chore of bringing wounded men to the edge of the mountain and using ropes to drop them to safety. Meanwhile, back in camp, Captain Glover decides to call off the artillery fire to save more fatalities, but this leaves Desmond, Howell, and the rest of the battalion susceptible to Japanese assaults. Despite the risk, Desmond continues his task. At one point, Desmond hides behind a mound of mud and dead corpses to evade Japanese troops. His camouflage works, and he is able to rescue a wounded colleague who would have otherwise been detected. After sending him down the slope, Desmond returns to the battlefield, where he is promptly noticed by opposing soldiers. He discovers a tunnel and enters it, encountering a Japanese soldier who has taken his own life. Realizing the tunnel's strategic relevance, Desmond escapes notice and finds a wounded Japanese soldier. True to his medical principles, he provides morphine and bandages to the enemy despite the hazards. Desmond comes from the tunnel at night and continues his unrelenting labor, rescuing as many troops as he can, even if his own hands are hurt. By dawn, Captain Glover observes that all the medic bays are occupied and inquires about how the injured were saved. One of the rescued guys compliments Desmond, calling him the guy nobody believed in for his heroic efforts. Desmond subsequently discovers Howell, who is also hurt, and brings him to safety. As Desmond goes back for Howell, he is noticed by an enemy sniper. Desmond purposefully attracts the sniper's fire, revealing the sniper's position, which enables Howell to kill the enemy soldier. Desmond continues to bring Howell to safety while saving additional men. As the Japanese troops on the hill are dealt with by Glover and the unit below, Desmond is raised by his friends and received tremendous acclaim for his valor. He goes to the medic tents and discovers that Smitty didn't survive. Glover apologizes for the past treatment of Desmond and respects his great accomplishments. He assures Desmond that the battalion would return to finish out the Japanese army the following day, which happens to be Desmond's Sabbath. Glover claims Desmond is not necessary, but Desmond insists on attending. The chapter finishes with Desmond concluding a prayer before rejoining his fellow troops to continue the mission. For his brave deeds, Desmond Doss is given the Medal of Metal, becoming the first conscientious objector to earn this highest military medal. Desmond Doss died away at age 87 in March 2006, renowned for his great bravery and selflessness.